Guys, thank you guys for joining. This is going to be a state of the New York City rental market webinar. We're going to cover a lot of stuff here. And let's just give some intros. I got two great dear friends. I got Gary Malin, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Corcoran. And I know Gary going way back to the City Habitats days, a long time. And this guy knows so much. He knows so much, and he has so much information and data funneling up to him that he sees things that we just don't see. That's the way it is. I got David Schlamm, who is the founder and CEO of City Connections Realty. I love myself some David Schlamm. He is one of the most well-loved characters. Sorry, David.
I mean, that's a fair characterization of him.
We're going to have fun today. He's a character. And yeah, he just runs an amazing ship. Everybody loves him. He's got amazing relationships with landlords, knows the rental markets in and out. So you got the amount of information, and anecdotal, sharing of information between landlords and these guys is immense. And my goal today is to extract as much market intelligence and insights from these two guys as possible. That's me and John's goal right now. So we're going to get right into it, guys. We're going to talk about the state of the New York City rental market. I want to get this out of the way quick, guys. I'll get out of the way, then we can go into the policies. Gary, I want to start with you. How do you see the current state of today's New York City rental market?
I mean, it's an extraordinarily competitive market that's going on right now. If you look at Manhattan and Brooklyn, they're at all-time highs in pricing. There's not a tremendous amount of inventory that's out there. So if you're a tenant looking to secure housing, it's definitely not the market you would hope for, in the sense of having a lot of opportunities, time to reflect. I think the biggest issue is when you're out there as a tenant, you need to realize if you like it, put an application in and move quickly, because it's very unlikely that apartment's going to sit for an extended period of time. And I think there's a lot of factors that are sort of playing into the rental market, whether, they didn't agree to Midtown rezoning to start building more residential properties. They didn't legalize basement apartments. They're fighting about 421A. The rent laws of 2019, COVID leases that were extended well beyond the normal term. I was with a head of a very large rental company last evening, and it's like he's finally getting inventory back now from COVID, because he did 27, 28, 29-month leases. So as a tenant entering the market, it's definitely extraordinarily competitive right now.
And what about OPs? Sorry, Johnny. OPs and concessions, and I'll let Johnny come right in.
I mean, unless it's a brand new building, it's very rare you're going to get any concession. There's no need for an owner to offer any incentive at this point. Their apartments are sitting on the market for a couple of days. So at this point, absent, someone's sitting on a tremendous amount of inventory, which would be a new development opportunity, concessions are pretty much non-existent, unless someone's looking to break the bank with their rent, that their rent doesn't make sense in today's environment, and they need that for their purposes. You might be able to get some free rent there, but that's really far and few between.
Got it. Now, Gary, I think you mentioned a couple of aspects which I think are really interesting. One is the extension of the COVID leases, throughout 2022, 2023, and some of those are expiring. You're getting some inventory back now. A lot of those were on the larger commercial side. And David, I'd like to turn to you now to kind of get the mindset of landlords in general, because they do run the gamut between small operators to large operators. And I'm curious, what are they thinking about the rental market dynamics today? Are they worried? Are they excited? What are they thinking?
Gotcha. Well, good morning, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be here. By the way, in all seriousness, it's great, and it's an important thing to think. Like Gary and I think together we probably have like 60 years of experience, and I just want to say that it's good to get along with fellow brokerage owners, managers, C-level executives, and agents themselves. With that said, Gary, I got a bone to pick with you, all right? I mean, last holiday, I sent you 3 pairs of your Speedo bathing suits in your favorite color, and I didn't even get a thank you note. Like, WTF, Gary?
I think you sent them to my old address. Did you send them to Long Island versus Manhattan? I think that's what probably happened.
No, I didn't. Okay, all right. Let me know that you got them, okay? But seriously. But seriously, this man knows a lot, which is good. I'm just here along for the ride because I'm old. But to answer your question, John, what landlords are thinking, and I kind of do know that because a lot of my close friends are landlords that I've been servicing for 30, 35 years. I mean, crazy long time. Well, you got a couple of things going on. First of all, the 2019 rent laws were just horrible for landlords, and it ended up not being good for tenants either. They didn't think it through, the lawmakers. But they're thinking of like, what's next? You know, that's the problem. I'm sure later on you may ask a question about the good cause eviction, which is a whole nother subject. But, you know, they're wondering, it's been thrown at them more laws and regulations and rules than ever before. I mean, I'm in the business now 34 years, and the last 5 years, it just seems just crazy on landlords and also us brokers, but that's another topic. It doesn't make any sense for the landlords to take rent stabilized apartments that are empty. And I have friends that have empty apartments for 3 years now, because, and people don't understand. My friends at a dinner will say, why are they keeping them empty? Well, the reason is if you take a rent stabilized tenant now, you know, for let's say a $3,000 studio and it's 1623, you're going to have that tenant for life, and you never get a chance to get the rents up. And the people who are having empty apartments are hoping that the laws will change one day, whether they will or will not. I can also say most of my friends, they're not interested in buying buildings and doing business in New York anymore. They're concerned. They're concerned. Also the rent laws put handcuffs on them as far as individual apartments, but as well as putting money into the building itself, rooftops, boilers, pointing, and all that, because they don't get the benefit anymore. So I'm a little pro landlord. I think it's too much. I mean, asbestos testing, carbon dioxide testing. I don't know what's going to be next. So the answer is that they're enjoying the high rents right now because no one gave them any latitude or any break during COVID. And we have to remember that. Some landlords weathered it fine. Some really got hurt. And that's the short answer, John.
Guys,
well, I gotta
by
say,
the way,
sorry, no, I just want to point out, because Gary, we did a podcast with you back in 2019, right when these rents passed, and that was exactly your prediction. And I'm curious, what's your take on this question? I mean, given that your predictions have come true.
It didn't take hard to figure this one out back then. I mean, listen, unfortunately, we're living in a world here in New York City where everyone is extraordinarily polarized on the political spectrum. And no one wants to meet in the middle. No one wants to be rational. No one wants to think about what's the most impactful and effective thing to do. And I think that these legislators, you know, it's grandstanding and they're trying to get votes, and they think that these are hot button topics that are going to get them votes. And I understand, like, that's what a politician's life's all about, is like votes, votes, votes. But the simple fact is, if you want New York City to be strong, you need to make smart policies that help New York City. I think close to 50% of the New York City's budget is based upon real estate taxes. If all of a sudden people aren't being able to maintain their buildings, if all of a sudden people are selling buildings at losses because of these rent laws, that doesn't impact the New York City quality of life whatsoever. And when I meet with these politicians and I talk with them, I'm like, listen, you know, you should be talking to people that are actually in the industry that you're trying to regulate before you regulate, because everything you're doing has unintended consequences that land up making it very difficult for people to actually do what you want them to do. Look at how little housing is being built. Look at how little housing is available on the market. They want to blame everybody else for why we're in the circumstance that we're in, but we're in that because of them. And it wasn't hard to predict that this was going to happen. And it's unfortunate that we're here. And I spoke with some politicians recently. I'm like, we all understand the benefit and the help that certain people need to secure housing. No one's denying that that exists, and no one doesn't want to help that process out. But they made one law that fits everyone. So someone who's, you know, below subsistence level income-wise is treated the same as a multimillionaire. Why is that the case? Like, that doesn't make sense. So it's a matter of trying to find a way to get people back to discuss things intelligently and make good, solid decisions. But it feels like, and it seems like, until there's truly some massive negative impact that these people get voted out, people are going to keep on pushing forward. And I know we're going to talk about some of the other legislations later. So it's unfortunate because we just can't get people to be rational at the moment. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon.
These are structural issues, right? I mean, these are structural issues.
I mean, listen, some of them are structural, some of them are political. they're hot button topics. I just think like you got to understand, like if you're trying to secure housing and you're trying to promote development, like New York City is an extraordinarily expensive place to build, to buy land, to construct, unions, everything else. It's very, very expensive. And owners are not in the public housing business, right? They're in the for-profit business. But yes, they're more than willing to take advantage of programs that exist to provide affordable housing. But when you drive too hard of a bargain, they simply can't afford to build. It's like what happened in Harlem. It was a little over a year ago. Someone wanted to build 50% affordable when the law was 30. And the city council person who was on top of it, who I believe she's recently been elected out of office, she wanted 100% affordable housing. So he turned it into a truck stop. I mean, did that help anybody? It didn't help anybody, but now I believe that project's back on track. But it's like, we need sensibility to move forward as a city. And I think that, unfortunately, I don't see that happening soon.
Gary, you mentioned city council. Let's stay there because this is one of our questions, and let's just go a little bit into this before we move back to David. Could you explain how the city council has proposed trying to alter rental commission structures once again?
Sure. Ultimately speaking, what they're trying to do is say if the landlord hires you, then the landlord pays you. And if the tenant hires you, the tenant pays you. And once again, while that sounds like it makes a lot of sense to someone who doesn't understand the mechanics of the business, what that ultimately means, if landlords now have to pay on each and every circumstance, they're going to increase their rents, right? So it's really just not understanding the value and the benefit of a broker and a broker services and what he or she does. And they also need to understand, like if you went on Street Easy today or City Snap today, I bet you 50% of the rental product that's out there is no fee, meaning you can go directly to the owner or you the owner's representative. So it's not as though the tenant doesn't have choice. So the tenant elects to work with a broker, understanding the facts and circumstances surrounding that. Why are you going to tell someone how much money they can or cannot make? I think these legislators watch like TV shows and think that every single real estate agent in the world is making $5, $6, $7 million, and like they're just being overpaid. Well, they don't realize how hard it is to be a real estate agent. They don't understand that there's times they don't make any money. They expend money to try to make money. In a competitive market like this, tenants put in multiple applications at the same exact time. There's very little loyalty in the market under circumstances like this. So it's just not understanding the way the business works. So I get it from the broad perspective. I hire you, I pay you. But in the end, there's negotiability in every single marketplace. And if you're being upfront, honest, and transparent with your tenant, which brokers for the most part are, then they understand what they're getting into. And by the way, you don't pay a fee unless you actually rent and secure an apartment. So you always have the ability to go on your own as well as work with a broker. And if David's broker or my broker can find you a deal that saves you hundreds of dollars a month and you pay a fee, you're happy to do that. So I just think they should let the market be a free market like it's always been versus trying to demonize brokerage.
Yeah. And guys, post your questions in the Q&A, guys. We're not going to forget about them. We're going to have time. It looks like we're going to get to your questions. Post your questions. We'll go through them. David, could you have any thoughts on what Gary just went through here? You have anything to add? Your own opinions?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is that from an economic point is, they're going to raise the rents. So you want to pay your broker's fee now or it's different one way or another. It is.
David, we got some connectivity issues there, David. I think he's freezing on us. John, you seeing that too?
Yeah, I was going to ask if that was on my end. David,
is it just from
your end? If Noah's
David
too.
I think it's you, David. I don't know.
You just got too much charisma, David. It's overwhelming.
David, you blew it.
Routers.
You blew the routers, David. How
about now? How about
perfect?
Now?
We know what you look like.
Okay.
Go ahead and chime in.
All right. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay.
Got a face for
all right.
radio.
All right. Okay. Don't laugh, Malin. All right. But seriously, it's an expensive town. It's an expensive town, and a lot of people make a lot of money. And my feeling, a little off topic, is I don't think it's a private landlord's responsibility to make sure that there's affordable housing. I think if they want to do that, they have to give more incentive for a landlord. It's a business. It really is a business. And I still feel really bad for all the people who bought buildings, let's say 10 years before 2019, and they weren't rich landlords that bought in the 70s and 80s, and they put their life savings into it, and they're going to work the building, and they're going to get increases from the apartments. They're going to put money into the buildings and raise the rents, and in one swoosh, that's taken away. So, that's just my personal feeling. But yeah, things, and what I understand, my dealings with any political people that I speak to once in a while, not as much as Mr. Malin, but a little bit here and there, is that it's even gone more far to the left than even a couple of years ago. So I don't think policy changes are coming so fast.
Right. And I want to shift a little bit. We talked about policy changes, right? The 2019 rent regulations, rent stabilized, what's happening in that rental environment based on what the city council enacted. I want to shift now, David, to where the rubber meets the road, and talk about what's going through the mindset of a rental agent right now, given that the rental market is, as Gary said, intensely competitive still. We're seeing, record prices in Manhattan and Brooklyn. What's the mindset of a rental agent these days on the street?
I think it's probably tough to break in to be a rental broker now than it was years ago. I think that if you don't control property and have control listings, I think it's very, very difficult. I think that with such a tight market and so much competition, that maybe there's some half truths being told. I think it can bring out bad behavior, because if I'm fighting on an open listing to get a deal approved and there's 12 other apps, what's going to make mine look special compared to the others? Do I fudge it a little bit? So these are things. I mean, I don't, and we don't really do open listings at my company, but it's tough. And enjoy it, everybody. Enjoy getting the fees, because Lord knows we worked our rear ends off during COVID, and some landlords were only paying a half a month OP. Most paid 1 month, but and now it's easier. But my prediction is that the second week of August, it's going to take a little bit of a breather, and I don't know what's going to happen after Labor Day. But it's good right now for a company that controls listings, and it's not a great time to start, because where do you market open listings? There aren't too many places anymore.
Right. Hey, David, tips and strategies for agents to just try to boost their productivity a little bit. I mean, let's get that out of the way quickly here.
Yeah. Well, first thing is more of a macro thing, is you got to be able to take a punch. And, if you lose a few deals, the good brokers, they let it roll off their back and they get in there the next day. Some brokers, they get damaged for days or weeks, and that's not good. So get back up after you've been knocked down. Let as many people you come in contact with that you can help them in all their real estate brokerage needs, renting, buying, selling. But make sure you know what you're doing. Don't come across and try to say you can do sales if you've never done a sale. Get smart. Take as many courses. Realty offers a lot of great free classes. Take advantage of them. Don't bitch and moan about the membership fees, and take advantage of some of the things Realty offers. Have some sort of CRM. Stay in touch with people. The number one reason you find out that a friend or relative rented something without calling you is they forgot that you're in the business. So keep in touch with them. Get out of your comfort zone. Go see new product. It's very important to do that. It's easier to get listings, by the way, with a new landlord in a down market, because they need you. So right now it's not going to be too easy to do that. Also, with open listing landlords, they tend to give the listings and the deals to people who they do business with. That just makes sense. And try to get exclusives. That's how I built my career, because I was a one-man band many years ago, and it was just easier for me. But I like the idea of being on the listing side. I hope that answers the question.
I would jump in to say one thing. I think it's critical for agents to realize that we're in the customer service business, hospitality business, first and foremost. And I think that, a lot of times customers sort of have this perception of what a real estate agent is and is not, because the few bad actors in the industry in general sort of overshadow everything else that everyone else does. So I think if you always put the client's needs first, you're staying on top of what they're asking you to do, that you're communicating with them regularly and consistently, you're getting back to them, you're giving them updates, you're explaining to them all the different aspects of the business along the way, you're preparing them in advance to win and succeed. All of these things lead to greater levels of success. And while it is harder to be in this business on the rental side than it was previously, I have agents that are making a fortune of money purely on the open side because they hustle, they work hard, they're professional, they're responsible, they're on top of it, they know the market. So I think it's understanding like what your role is in this process, and then, doing it to the best of your ability. And also realizing, like David said, you're not going to win every transaction, right? Like sometimes things are going to happen. There's nothing that you could do about that, but you just got to put your head down. You got to go to work. You got to build your pipeline. You got to be on social media. You got to spend money to make money. All of these things are the necessary tools to be successful. And whatever firm you're working at, you have people inside of your firm who are experienced, who are smart, who understand the industry. Sit down with them, learn from them, ask questions. Like, you can't be afraid to like dig in. And I think it's important to tap into your personal network as well as your professional one. Sooner or later, all these clients lead to referrals, right? And referrals could be a buyer, it could be a seller, it could be an exclusive opportunity. But if you're not in the game, then you're not going to win the game, right? And that's the thing that they have to understand when you're new to this business. You just got to work.
Yeah. And you just divulged an incredible formula for success. And it's really about, you got to have that fight in you. You got to have that thick skin, and you got to have that determination to do all those things that you talked about. It could sound daunting from an agent's perspective if they're not doing these things and they want to break into it. Connect with someone that's done it. Well said to both of you guys. Gary, what's the good cause eviction? And what are any potential impacts there? Sorry to switch right back in here, but I want to get this question.
Look, good cause eviction is essentially universal rent control, right? That's ultimately what it is. It basically wants to tell you what you can and cannot do with respect to renewing a lease for somebody. Now, granted, if someone's not paying their rent or there's some other circumstances, by all means, you can evict them. But if like the reason is the rent is too high, the answer is they're trying not to allow that to ever happen again. So the laws that were floated out there that have yet to been approved were basically the greater of 3% increase from the prior lease or 1.5 times the consumer price index. Now, in a market like this where inflation is raging, that could give someone a very large increase comparatively speaking. But once again, it's all tied to the fact that all the owner's costs and expenses of doing business and everything else have also risen. So basically, it's telling you as a tenant that you have some predictability when it comes to staying in your home, right? That's the goal of the legislation, is that if you want to stay in your home and you want to be here for a long period of time, and this is where you plan on laying down roots, you have the knowledge that this is the sort of band at which rent increases can take place. Now, you could argue that's a good thing or a bad thing. You could argue a lot of different things. But one thing is, which they don't seem to understand, is, well, that could also mean that people end up staying in their homes longer and longer and longer than ever before, which would then not increase inventory coming to the marketplace. So the normal ebb and flow of apartments coming and going and providing opportunities and letting markets adjust for all these different factors, all of a sudden you've once again constricted supply. So I get the headlines of it, I get the reasons behind it, but once again, the free market has worked. The free market will continue to work. Look what happened during COVID. Look what owners needed to do. Look how long it took them to, fight their way back out. And I just think, like, once again, it's not understanding what will ultimately happen. It's like, it sounds really good on a headline. It sounds really good when I'm meeting my constituents and I'm walking around my neighborhood and telling them I'm fighting for them. I appreciate that. But what are the practical, implications of that? They're not as concerned. So that's what it ultimately is, capping what someone could basically charge on a rent renewal. All free market apartments, not stabilized, not controlled. Free market apartments will now have caps to them, and that's obviously not what the market is looking for.
Right. And speaking of that sort of constrained inventory, I just kind of have a jump ball here so anybody can grab this one. Just general thoughts on 421A at this point.
Well, I think it's absolutely critical to incentivize the developer to take the risks to build. I think that the city just doesn't understand, that you need incentives in a city like New York, where land prices are extraordinarily high, construction prices, you have union labor, you have a lot of laws, regulations, everything else, all things that, factor into building a home and building a building. But you don't know what market your building is going to enter into, right? You don't know when your apartment's going to come online. What happens if your apartment was ready to come online March of 2020? Then what? So you need to give people the reason to put a shovel in the ground. You need to give them opportunities to make money. If they're providing affordable housing inside of their properties as well, it's a win-win for everyone. But it's this whole concept of demonizing the developer, demonizing the brokerage community. It's like, no, we have to work hand in hand. We have to work together to find a solution that's fair versus this is the deal, take it or leave it. So that's why go look at the permits, go look at what's out there. There's very little rental construction happening in this world, and it's not going to happen unless you're incentivized.
And sales construction too. I mean, like what is our world going to look like in 2 years? Inventory wise.
Yeah, look, inventory is constrained and it's going to continue to be constrained. And when it's constrained, what happens to prices? They go rise. So once again, it's like they're not understanding like all these different things lead to increased pricing. And then they want to complain about affordability. Well, they're not really being part of the solution. They are the problem. And once again, it's very political in my personal opinion. And sooner or later, the rubber will hit the road and people are going to have to be sensible and meet and talk and work things out. But I just don't see that happening in the next 12 to 24 months because they just feel like they're getting worse and worse, not better and better.
And that's what David was saying, right? David, you're saying these policies, these political, you don't see them changing anytime soon. David, what are your thoughts on this whole 421A and lack of construction?
I don't see them changing anytime soon. And just think about this. I don't know if this number was stated. Depending on who you talk to, there's between 20 and 40,000 empty rent stabilized apartments in New York City. So if you put those back on the market and even let the landlords get their normal increases, there's still going to be, quote, affordable housing. And that would help. That's one simple thing. Meet halfway in the middle. I mean, if an apartment needs $100,000 worth of work and the landlord can only raise it $88, I think it is. Would you spend $100,000 to get an $88 increase on a $600 studio? I don't think you would, unless you want to commit economic suicide. So yes, it's difficult because it is political. There's a lot of parts to it, and it's a shame because I think working together in this case really could be helpful.
You got to also realize, if you think about all these apartments that no one knows the real number that are sitting on the sidelines, a lot of them have people living in them for extended periods of time. So from a fire code perspective, from an electrical code perspective, lead paint, asbestos, I don't know, you name it, anything and everything that needs to get done to an apartment to bring it up to today's standards. It's like you should be incentivizing people to spend the money to bring their buildings up to code, to make everybody who lives in that building safe. So you can't expect someone, like David said, you can only get $15,000 spread out over 15 years. So, it's like really like $1,000 a year. You can barely fix an outlet in the city for $15,000, right? So like they have to realize like there's a greater good. First of all, employment happens, right? Because contractors, electricians, plumbers, you name it, right? You're giving people incentive to spend money and make long-term commitments into this city versus telling someone, well, you can't do what you can't do, so don't rent the apartment. And then they want to tax them for warehousing the apartment, but the person can't live there because it's not up to code. Like once again, it's not sensible, and they need to understand that because they're not in construction, so they don't understand.
Gary Malin for city council.
No.
I know, but we need you, Gary. This is a greater good situation, Gary. You know what I'm saying? This is your moment.
My wife would literally hit me for a third job.
Yeah,
I'll be your assistant. I will.
I'm sorry, guys. I'm in.
Done deal.
All right, we're going to questions. We got our questions out of the way, guys. Post your questions down here. I got a whole bunch of questions. We're not going to do rapid fire, but I'm going to just post these questions, and either Gary or David, I want you guys, based on who has the answer here, to just speak up. Okay. From Ed: how do I get an owner to pay 15% and advertise as no fee in such a hot market?
You don't. That's the answer. They're not going to.
Sorry, Ed.
There's no reason for them to pay you 15% and do all of that. Yes, I agree that they might want to draw in more people, advertising no fee, but they're very likely only going to, if they're willing to do it, pay you a month fee. To get an owner to pay 15% is, it's when their market's not in their favor. Right now, the market's in their favor.
Agree.
Right. Great. And the next one, I don't think we're going to read through all of these because, by the way, everybody, everybody who registered also asked questions. So we literally have hundreds of questions, of which they're bracketed into some categories. So we might not get to your specific question, but hopefully we'll touch on something that's tangential to your question. So hopefully that counts. In the chat, the next one up was Sandra, and she asked, what's the status and timeline for the changeover from gas to electric and rental buildings? And I think that also touches on sort of that broader aspect, Gary, that you were just talking about, which is that there's a lot of regulation to what you can and can't do in terms of as a landlord, and also just to the general cost of doing things. I'm just curious if we could just touch on that.
I don't necessarily know the timeline of that whatsoever. So, that's certainly, a little over my expertise, but maybe Mr. Schlamm knows this better than I do.
I wish I did. I actually don't know the timeline. I know it's a worry and a concern and a big cost, but I don't know the timeline.
Okay. Well, if these guys don't know, then we're not, it's not critical at this very juncture in time. And when it becomes critical, I promise you these people will know. All right, Robin, are you advising tenants to sign 2-year leases now if they are offered, or wait to renew?
I mean, look, I think it depends on your individual circumstance and what your personal, horizon is. But, listen, if you want, I think there's always expenses moving in and out of a home, right? So if you can get a 2-year lease and, you feel comfortable with what the prices are, I wouldn't try to second guess that. I like stability, right? Especially in the rental market. Yes, maybe the market could go down, right? That's what someone's hoping if I don't sign a 2-year lease. But it's very unlikely that, in the next 2 years, there's going to be any major shift. So I would sign a 2-year lease just because now I know I'm locked in. I could put my roots down and not worry about expenses of moving down the road if I have to.
I agree.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank you, David.
All right.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so speaking of lack of stability and markets headed down, there's a number of questions just generally about the commercial sector, especially about commercial leases. I'm wondering if either of you want to touch on that.
I can talk a little bit about that. What is the question?
Just your general thoughts on the commercial leasing market right now, whether that's office, residential, multifamily, or even if it's just retail. Like what are you seeing out there?
We do some office leasing at my company, and what's interesting is I wouldn't want to own office buildings right now. I think it's going to take a while. I'm really not sure what's going to happen. We have seen a trend where the B and C buildings are getting hurt more, that there's a flight to quality. I mean, there are deals being done by companies, like especially hedge funds, where they're getting $200,000-$300,000 a foot. And you can go into the Flatiron and go into famous developers' desert properties, and they advertise stuff online for $29 a square foot. So there's a big differential. Obviously, the big question is, are people going to come back to work instead of just working remotely? And I think the hybrid situation is here to stay. So there's plenty of inventory in the office leasing market. There's a lot of sublets. And I think we're going to see more as time goes by. I would not want to own a B or C office building right now.
Right. It's like what Dave just said. I think what you look at what's going on at Hudson Yards and how extraordinarily well their office leasing is doing. It sort of tells you, like, I might not need the 100,000 square feet of space that I previously had, and maybe I need 50,000 square feet of space because people aren't coming in 5 days a week. But I want nicer space. I want amenities. I want to make my people feel there's a reason to show up to the office. I think we all know collaboration, creativity, growth, all of that happens inside of an office. So I think it's important to find the proper balance between giving your employees and everyone the opportunity to, like, be flexible, but at the same time understand the culture is a very important thing. And that's why I think the higher level office buildings will do better until we figure out what the next stage of work looks like. And that's why it's also really critical to look at rezoning and figure out, like, can some of these buildings that are not doing well in the sales market be converted to residential? Now, not every building for air and light could be converted, but there's definitely some. And I read some, there's a couple of trades recently, which I don't know if they're B or C office buildings, but they were well below what this owner thought he or she had 2-3 years ago. And once again, what does that mean? It trades for less value, it's worth less, real estate taxes are going to come in less, the city's going to have issues. So that's why this time really calls for creativity. On the retail side, walk around the city. I just moved back to the city a little over a month ago. There's people everywhere, right? The retail spaces and the prime locations are doing well. Restaurants are doing well. New York City is still the place people want to live. It's just they don't necessarily want to go to the office each and every day.
Yeah, interesting. All right, I don't know if you guys haven't answered this question, but I'll ask it anyway. What would you say is a good way to find landlords that accept diplomats that won't consider waiving immunity? Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to give that to David.
That's what I thought.
You know, it's so funny. I was going to say, give that to Gary, because I mean, and here's why. I have a small little company with 75 broker. My buddy here, he's got thousands of people. So we don't get these examples so much. So Gary, please tell everyone your answer.
My answer would simply be ask around your company, ask around agents that are in the business, that know the business, and speak to them and find out who's been friendly to that. Once again, that's a tough situation. Obviously, you understand where certain owners are coming from. But, once again, I think that's also sort of a few bad actors sort of cast a shadow on everyone else that pays their rent timely and there's no problems and there's no issues. So sometimes it's more about the perception than the reality. So I think you just got to ask a lot of questions internally. And then if, you're not getting the answers you want, pick up the phone, call the bigger, more institutionalized landlords, the Glenwoods of the world, the Rudins, people that have very big portfolios that understand the relateds and reach out and find out what their policies are. Sometimes you just got to pick up the phone and do your own due diligence at times.
Very good, Gary. Very good.
Well, since you were unable to answer that, David, I needed to come up with something.
Thank you.
All right, so I want to pivot because there's a number of questions about productivity tips, what's working, what's not, and some people are asking, how do you break into the market? And I'm curious, from both of you guys have nice high positions. You see what's working, you see what doesn't. And Gary, you touched on it earlier. Just thick skin, getting out there and just seeing for yourself what's working. But I'm curious if there's anything you can pass on about what successful agents are doing right now that may or may not be different than what they were doing in, say, 2019.
Yeah, I mean, my first thing is that you need to realize that you need to learn the market. You need to get out there and you need to work and you need to understand the inventory. That's just first and foremost, because people want to work with knowledgeable people. And sometimes being the second broker to work with someone is actually the best thing that could possibly happen, because that first broker maybe didn't have the customer service skills that he or she should have had. They weren't that knowledgeable in the marketplace. It felt all about them. It didn't feel about their client. So that's just one thing. Two, you really just have to put some time, effort into not being a secret agent. And what I mean by that is you need to promote yourself in every way, shape, and form. I understand the respect that people don't always love social media. I get that. But if you want to be in this business, you need to be on social media. You need to be out there. You need to create your public persona. So when someone's searching and someone's looking and they go online and they find you and they feel like they can relate to you, then now all of a sudden you've created that. So it's like you have to be out there, right? And I got to tell you, a lot of agents, if they did what I call a digital audit of themselves and they actually went online and Googled themselves, nothing special. Go Google yourself and see what comes up. A lot of time agents have information that's out there that they themselves have not updated in years. So it doesn't truly reflect who they are today, or it might not have all the things that they've accomplished. So it's important to do that. And then we have this concept called spinning plates, right? Which is you have to have multiple lead generation things going on at all different times. You can't put all your eggs in one basket and hope that that basket's always going to work. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But I will say, like David brought up earlier, CRM. You must use a CRM if you're in this business. I appreciate that it takes time. I appreciate that it could be complicated. I get it. And I respect that entirely because your time is limited. But once you learn it and once you master it, it now pays you back. So it's like constantly networking, constantly picking up the phone. And don't make this business purely by texting and emailing. Pick up the phone, call someone, talk to someone, take them out for lunch, breakfast, dinner, coffee. It doesn't make a difference. Make this business personal and the results will come. If you just treat it like a business, this business becomes a little bit harder for people at times.
Yeah, reach out and touch someone.
Yeah, I'd like to
call
add,
them just to say hi. Sorry, Dave.
All good points, Mr. Malin, all good points. The macro thing of is it's a lot of hard work. And I think a lot of people, it could be because of TV with, as you mentioned previously, Gary, that we don't make $5-6 million a year, that it's so easy. You walk in and you see the commission amount from, I won't say anyone's name on the program, $350,000. It looks really, really easy. But I will tell you that the very successful brokers, especially in sales, who make the seven figures, they work 24/7. They don't have a life. I mean, it's really incredible. For those mere mortals like us, when you do a CRM, what Gary said, try to think what you're doing. You have your own business. You have a Corcoran and City Connections provides the umbrella to work on, but it's you, the broker. It's not our companies that sell the apartment. It's you. And because we all pretty much do the same thing, in my opinion, pretty much so. And so you have to hire a virtual assistant if you don't want to do the grunt work. That's how you grow your business. I mean, I started where I was just me. I did everything, and I had, some portfolios, and I didn't want to work 24/7 the rest of my life. And I worked 7 days a week the first 3 years. I mean, it was horrible, but it paid off, and I'm glad I did it. But make it a business and invest in yourselves, as Gary say. Very, very important.
I love it. The CRM will pay off if you use it correctly and over time. Absolutely. All right, let's throw this out there. How do you encourage potential renters to get a head start, to maybe take advantage of this intensely competitive marketplace?
I always tell people you just got to go out and look at product. As a tenant, don't be so like blinders on, be a little more adaptable to the type of building you were willing to live in, be adaptable to the neighborhood that you were willing to live in. Maybe you're going to need to spend a little more money than you thought you were going to have to spend. Because I've always said, unless you have an unlimited budget, which was great if you do, there's always going to be a trade-off as a tenant. And if you can afford to wait till like after the summer's over, right? And let's say hit the market maybe right after Labor Day, when most people have secured housing, because August is historically the busiest month for the rental market. Maybe at that point, the competition slows down a little bit. It feels less intense. You can have a little bit of reflection. Maybe an owner will be a little more reasonable with their rent, so on and so forth. So, if you have the ability to wait, obviously, I always think that the fall/winter months, in terms of being a tenant, they're more favorable to you just because there's less of you out there. But that doesn't mean you can do that. Some people have no choice and they got to live and they got to do what they got to do. And in those cases, be flexible.
I'd like to add, I see sometimes where people say my maximum budget is $4,000, which is $48,000 for the year. And they pass on things that are 42, 43. And I say, wait, you're spending $50,000 on rent on something you really, really like, and you're going to pass because it's an extra $2,000. It doesn't make sense. Sometimes I think people get hung up on numbers and the fact that they can't negotiate so much. And yes, it is better to look in the slower months. But one disadvantage is there's less listings that come available in the winter months, but the competition is much less. And I think it skews in your favor to look in the winter months.
All right. Speaking of getting hung up on numbers, we have a number of questions about data. And the question is, a lot of folks are asking, what are the hot neighborhoods? What are the slow neighborhoods? What are rents doing? This and that. And I guess the overall question is data. Where do you guys get your data? I mean, Gary, we know with the city habitats, you have the old black and white report, which was phenomenal on the rental side. But, these days, where do you go for data? What are your tips on data?
I mean, we're fortunate. We have a whole research department at our company. So we have that team that's constantly scouring the marketplace. So we're fortunate to have a very talented group of people that are heading up that division for us. Secondly, because of the size and scale of the company and the amount of business that we do, obviously we ourselves have our own internal proprietary database, with all this information being there. And then it's just, once again, looking at the market as a whole, our internal listings database, CitySnap has a lot of great data in it. So I think it's like, data comes from multiple different points, and we're fortunate size and scale gives you a good vantage point of the marketplace. So that's where we get our data from.
And what I do is there's a couple of portfolios that I oversee, but I will sit down or email with team leaders who run portfolios and get my information from that. If that doesn't work, I call Gary at like 2 a.m. and he helps me.
Awesome.
For a couple $100, David gets one piece of information.
First of all, no one's getting the $20 for mentioning UrbanDigs there, but I mean, it's cheaper for me. That's
Did we
fine.
offer it? I got a couple questions here about the voucher Section 8 program.
Mhm. I mean, look,
I have no idea what that is.
listen, you know, it's such a complicated process, and it's unfortunate that it's such a complicated process. You know, I have met with the city, I have met with people the city has hired to investigate ways to make these programs better. And I think that unfortunately, the city probably does not have enough people to handle the problems that exist with the number of clients looking for vouchers. They've certainly raised the price of vouchers, which then increases the opportunities that become available. But if you're an agent, you know, and you need to get answers, like my answer to my team always is, you know, speak to the tenant, find out what he or she knows. Sometimes they don't have all the information, unfortunately. Sometimes, you know, they've just not been given enough, right? And then find out who their caseworker is. Try to work with their caseworker immediately and start to understand, like, what type of program is available to this person? What type of money is available to this person? But the problem is, it's such a complicated web inside of these city programs that unfortunately, even when you're doing the best of your ability to help a tenant with a voucher, sometimes it's the caseworker that literally puts the wrench in the deal. They're not responding to you. They won't schedule the inspection of the apartment. I had someone that was very upset about, you know, his or her voucher, and we kept on trying to explain to them, like, can you just tell us how much money your voucher is for? But it's like, I don't know how much my voucher is for. So like, we're trying to explain to them, well, we need to understand that to help you find the proper apartment. And then we finally got in touch with the caseworker, and I don't know what program this was. I've never heard this before. So, you know, whatever the case is, it's like, well, it depends on the zip code he wants to live in. I'm like, well, how is that helpful? So I think the problem is that people want to do the right thing, but they're scared also, right? As a real estate agent now in this business, in this market, with all the testers that the city has hired to sort of see if you're quote unquote doing the right thing, they're scared, and understandably so. They don't want to lose their license. They don't want to say the wrong thing. But when the city's the problem, or the agency's the problem, or the caseworker's the problem, it never falls back on them. It always falls back on the owner or the broker. So, you know, it needs to be completely revamped. And I think that they understand that. I just don't know how easy it is to actually make those changes. It's a very big, complicated thing because there's multiple different programs, you know, managed by multiple different agencies. So it's not like one size fits all. So it's a problem. And then you have situations where, you know, at times they're discouraging brokers unintentionally by not willing to pay them a fair amount of money for their services. You know, it normally was always a 1 month payment to the broker. Now, all of a sudden, I'm hearing it dropping it to a half a month's rent. Like, a real estate agent needs to make money and support himself or herself in the same way that everybody else does. So it's just complicated, and I feel for people that are trying to do it. But I'm working very closely with Revney and trying to like find ways to make this a more streamlined process. You know, even if we're able to accomplish this goal, which everyone's online to do, including the people from the city that I've met with, I just think it's going to take a very extended period of time because it's not a simple process.
I'd like to add that.
Yep.
I'd like to add that I totally agree that it's understaffed. I've spoken to people who are very knowledgeable about this, and they're understaffed, and these are salaried people, and there's no incentive for the caseworker to get back to you right away. And they have maybe 50, 100 cases on their plate. The other part, the idea of the voucher program is good. I believe in helping people who need help. I mean, that's just the universal thing. It's doing the right thing. But what I don't like is, why is it okay that a landlord not get rent for months and months and months? Because this process takes months, up to 6 months it can take. And then the inspection coming in, looking at things that even a normal person, non-voucher person, would not look at. They wouldn't hire someone to come in and inspect the electrical outlets or if the building has violations. So there's a disconnect there. And that's why landlords don't love that. I wouldn't love the fact that Gary, let's pretend that you're on a voucher, okay? And you come to me and we go through the process, 3 months go by, and then you decide, you know what, Schlamm, I don't like the apartment. I don't want it. You tell your caseworker. So the landlord's out. They can kick it any time that they want to. So that's what I'd like them to improve how fast it goes. So it makes it a little more appealing to a landlord. And then also think about it, in the hottest market we've seen, the highest prices, you add that in, and it's also doesn't really make a landlord too happy to possibly wait 3 months and wait for them to check out everything about the building, including violations on the building.
I just want to pause for a quick PSA. Gary, you mentioned you're working with Realty, and I just want to, ask you, if agents can get involved in this process, how would you recommend they get involved to help out?
Look, Realty continually sends out information about seminars they're holding or stuff that you could reach out to your local legislators on. So I think it's important to just read those, see what's going on, be part of certain committees that are out there, attend meetings. I mean, I always tell people, like, you got to put your time into whatever it is that you're going to do, right? And you want to be educated, you want to learn, you want to be helpful. Sometimes you have to be the person that initiates that versus waiting for someone to come to you. So, Realty in particular, wants to, do what they can. And like I said, I'm working simply because I think it's important to figure out a solution that helps everybody. Like, people like, there's people who have voucher and want the apartment, right? They're ready to go. The landlords approve them. And then their caseworker comes and says, square footage is too small, deal denied. Like, so you'd rather put this person back in a shelter versus putting them in this home that they want to live in. And then it's like you go through this whole process. So it's a difficult thing. And I think real life examples, if you're working with clients like this and you're running into problems like this, pick up the phone, reach out to Realty, find out who you could give this real life example to, because they're far closer and far tighter with like the legislators than I am or anybody else is. And I think real life examples of like, not the fake story, like the real story, will help people understand that maybe the system isn't what they think it is.
Excellent. Whether the new Airbnb enforcement rules after September 5th are likely to have an impact on inventory. You guys hear anything about that?
I mean, look, the bottom line is if they actually enforce what they say they're going to enforce, and these things become less valuable or they can't rent them the way they want to rent them, they're going to have to give back these units, right? And the units are going to have to hit the market, so they're not going to be the type of that they are right now. So, there's definitely a component of the market that's been impacted by that. So it'll be very interesting to see how all that, plays itself out.
Okay. John, you got anything, or I got another question?
Yeah, no, I've got a lot of questions about the role of StreetEasy and Zillow in the market today, and I'm curious how that dynamic looks between Realty, StreetEasy, Zillow.
Well, my only thing to say is, we should all be focusing on CitySnap. That is the brokerage community's tool to combat all third-party aggregators. Doesn't make a difference which one in particular. This is something that I and Corcoran, as well as many firms, have put a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of attention to. Over the last 6 months, there's been probably 150 to 200 advancements inside of the system. They just reached out and gave everyone what they call Pro Plus for free. It used to be something they were charging for. So everything that the brokerage community has been conveying to Realty, to CitySnap, to everyone is actually coming to fruition. And my only voice is on this matter, and I understand that the sort of incumbents are always stronger, right? But, Noah, you remember this back in the day, as you, David, there used to be something called the NewYorkTimes.com, right? They were the dominant player in the residential brokerage business online. They're dead and gone, right? Then Craigslist came in, dead and gone. So anybody can be dead and gone if there's a good alternative. And I think people just need to realize that if you build something new like CitySnap, you can't expect that the day it launches, it's as good as something that's been in business for 15 years. It just simply doesn't work that way. It takes time to refine it, to utilize it, to understand it, and to get it into your day-to-day rotation. I think a lot of it is change of behavior. If the brokers themselves change their behavior, and if the brokers themselves push CitySnap and they pushed it to their consumers and the marketing and everything else that was out there, consumers will go, right? If any single website that is a very dominant website, I don't care if it's StreetEasy or anybody else, if for whatever their reasons are, if they went out of business tomorrow morning on their own, for whatever their reasons were, then you'd still be able to find a place to rent or buy the next morning by searching for it. So I don't think that any firm or anything is that dominant, because using any one of these things. Look at the sales market. If you ask anybody what percentage of deals they're co-broking, they'll tell you it's probably 90%, if not more, of the deals are co-brokes. So if any one of these websites was so overwhelmingly dominant, there'd be more direct deals. It's what we believe versus what reality is. And my belief in reality is we all need to move towards CitySnap because that's the future of our industry.
Yeah. And guys, I'll just echo, guys, update your listings, update your listings, keep your listings active and up to date, because the data is only as good as the agent that enters it and maintains it, guys. It all starts with you. All right. I mean, we got one last question here. We're running out of time, guys. I'm sorry. There's so many questions here. I apologize. I'll bring these guys back. But guys, Brooklyn and vacancy rates. All right. Quick. And where are vacancy rates? How's Brooklyn doing?
Very little inventory in Brooklyn. Brooklyn, prices are very high. Inventory is extraordinarily low. Brooklyn is such an amazing place to live and have your business and everything else. So, it's doing extraordinarily well. It's tough. I feel bad for all agents in this marketplace because they have tons of clients. They don't have tons of opportunity for them at the moment.
And vacancy rates, what, under 2%?
I'd say it's right around there, give or take. Could be slightly above, slightly below, but what comes goes. What comes goes. So what we need is, a change of inventory levels. And I think now that these COVID deals are finally burning off, you'll start to slowly but surely see inventory come back. But that doesn't mean it's going to be affordable per se. Right. It just means there might be more opportunity in the marketplace.
No, and John, I'd like to say one thing that just came to my brain. What's really important, since we have a lot of rental brokers on this call right now, is you can help to fight this situation with, banning brokers fees. Reach out to your local congressman, councilwoman, councilman. That's a pretty important thing that you can do. Let them know. We have tens of thousands of rental brokers or brokers in New York City. So let them know. That's one thing that you can do because, this is a fight that we got to keep fighting. I know it's a little out of subject, but I think it's important. That's something you can do.
Yeah. Well, guys, this was great. I mean, I'm gonna end it, guys. We're right at 11 o'clock. We're gonna be out of time, guys. I mean, if we didn't get to your questions, I apologize. We tried to get a little bit of everything here. Listen, guys, Gary, Malin, David Schlamm, look them up, email them, tell them thank you. Tell them thank you, guys.
Appreciate your time as always, and thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Yeah.
When will you be sending Gary and I our checks?
Well, you didn't mention UrbanDigs. You don't get the check, David.
UrbanDigs. Buy a subscription to UrbanDigs. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, brought to you by Carl's Jr.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you to Gary Malin. Thank you to David Schlamm. Guys, tell them thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I love you guys. It's been fantastic. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll catch you all next time. Enjoy the summer hot day. Bye, guys.
Yeah, enjoy, guys. Bye, Schlammer.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, Malin.